The long way home. She took the fastest route. He took the right one. They both arrived broken. The needle was in the wrong vein. Daisy saw it before anyone else did. The subtle puffing beneath the skin, the way the fluid pooled instead of flowing, the patient's arm beginning to swell with the slow cruelty of something gone quietly wrong. She moved fast. She always moved fast. She corrected the line, retaped it, charted it, and was already walking down the hall before the patient could even register discomfort. Behind her, she heard the monitor settle. Behind her, everything was fine. That was what she told herself. That was what she had been telling herself for 2 years. Adaeze Okonkwo had come to Seoul on a mission, and missions did not leave room for slowness. She had grown up in Lagos, watching her mother come home from 12-hour shifts at a government hospital with shoes that had worn through at the sole, and a dignity that had not. Her mother had given everything to nursing, and nursing had given her back exhaustion, debt, and a retirement card with 30 signatures. Adaeze had decided, at age 19, that she would not be her mother. She would be faster, sharper, better positioned. She would not bleed quietly for a system that would not bleed back. Seoul had been the plan. The international nursing certification, the bilateral hiring program, the promise of salaries that made Lagos figures look like rounding errors. She had studied for the Korean nursing licensure exam in a room with no air conditioning, memorizing pharmacology tables at 2 a.m. while her roommates slept. She had passed on the first attempt. She had arrived at Hanyang University Hospital with 2 suitcases, 6 months of savings, and the absolute conviction that she was exactly where she needed to be. 2 years later, she had 3 promotions, a growing reputation among the senior nursing staff, and a persistent tightness in her chest that she attributed to the dry winter air. She did not stop to consider that it might be grief. Dr. Park Junho met Adaeze the way most people meet people who will change their lives, without recognizing the significance of the moment. It was a Tuesday in November, and he was standing at the nurse's station, reviewing labs for a post-operative patient, when she appeared beside him, already typing into a chart, already in motion. "The potassium on bed 7 is low," she said, not looking at him. "I flagged it an hour ago." He looked at the chart. She was right. "I'll order a supplement." "Already drafted the order, just needs your signature." He looked at her then. She was still not looking at him. She was already moving to the next thing, the way a river moves, constant, directional, indifferent to what it passes. He signed the order and watched her go, and felt, without fully understanding why, a strange flicker of recognition. Like looking in a mirror hung at an unexpected angle. Junho had his own story, though he rarely told it. He was the second son of a Busan family that had given everything to his older brother's education, and then, when the brother chose music over medicine, redirected all of those expectations onto Junho with the force of a tide change. He had not chosen medicine so much as been chosen by it. He had been good at the sciences, good at the exams, good at the long, horrible years of residency that broke softer people. He was efficient, he was precise. His attendings praised his clinical instincts and his ability to move through a ward like a man solving equations, quickly, cleanly, with no wasted motion. What they did not say, because medicine does not reward this kind of observation, was that Junho had stopped feeling the patients about 18 months ago. They had become problems. Interesting ones sometimes, but problems, not people. He did not know this about himself. That was the most dangerous part. It was a Thursday in late January when the patient came in. Lee Myung-ho, 53 years old, former logistics manager, presenting with chest tightness and shortness of breath. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand with both of hers. Adaeze triaged him at 11:47 p.m. on a night when the ward was already at 94% capacity, when 2 nurses had called in sick, when she had already been on her feet for 9 hours and was calculating how to redistribute her remaining energy across the next 3. She took his vitals. She noted the irregular rhythm. She flagged it for the on-call physician, who was Junho. Junho reviewed the ECG at 11:59 p.m. He was simultaneously managing a patient in respiratory distress in Bay 4 and signing discharge paperwork for 2 others. He looked at the tracing for 40 seconds. The rhythm was irregular, but the pattern read, to his exhausted and overstretched eye, as anxiety-related. Atrial flutter with a benign morphology. He ordered a sedative and a follow-up in the morning. He moved on. Adaeze administered the medication. She checked the vitals again at 12:30 a.m. They were stable. She charted and moved on. At 4:17 a.m., Lee Myung-ho went into ventricular fibrillation. The code team brought him back. It took 11 minutes, which is a very long time in a cardiac arrest situation. He survived, but only barely, and when the cardiologist arrived at 5 a.m. and reviewed the original ECG, she looked at it for a long moment and then said very quietly, "This was not atrial flutter. This was Wolff-Parkinson-White. This needed a cardiology consult last night." Adeze was standing at the foot of the bed when the cardiologist said this. She felt the words land somewhere in her sternum. She thought of the moment she had handed the flag off and moved on. She thought of all the moments she had moved on from, all the careful pauses she had compressed into seconds, all the instincts she had clipped short because there was always somewhere else to be. She thought, what did I miss? What did I rush past? Junho was in the corridor. His face was the particular stillness of a person holding something very large and very heavy, perfectly still because any movement might shatter it. The cardiologist passed him without speaking. He stood there for a moment that stretched like taffy, thin and translucent, and then he walked into the family consultation room and sat down in a plastic chair and stared at the wall. The hospital's clinical governance process began within 48 hours. Both Adeze and Junho were required to attend a case review. It was not punitive. The language of the process was careful and procedural, but it required something neither of them was accustomed to doing. It required them to go back, not forward, not faster, back. They sat across a table from each other in a small conference room with bad lighting and a whiteboard still faintly showing equations from a previous meeting. The case coordinator walked them through the timeline. Every decision, every moment, every fork in the road where they had chosen speed over stillness. Adeze watched Junho as the coordinator spoke. He was writing notes, precise and neat, the handwriting of someone who had learned that legibility was a form of discipline, but his hand was moving slower than usual. She could see it. Something in him had slowed. "Dr. Park," the coordinator said, "can you walk us through your clinical reasoning at 11:59 p.m.? Junho put down his pen. He looked at the table for a moment. Then he said, "I was managing 3 concurrent cases. I reviewed the ECG for approximately 40 seconds. I made a pattern recognition call based on a similar presentation I had seen during residency." He paused. "I did not take adequate time to consider the differential. I did not consult cardiology because I did not want to make an unnecessary referral at midnight." Another pause. "I did not want to look uncertain." The room was quiet. Adeze said, "I charted the irregular rhythm and flagged it correctly, but when the physician order came back as sedative and follow-up, I accepted it without question. I had a secondary concern about the morphology of the rhythm that I did not escalate." She heard her own voice saying this and felt with startling clarity how long she had been swallowing secondary concerns in the name of efficiency. "I didn't escalate because I didn't want to appear to be questioning the doctor. I was also managing a full ward. I told myself it wasn't my call." "It is every nurse's call to escalate a clinical concern," the coordinator said, not unkindly. "I know," Adeze said. "I know that." The case review ended. They walked out of the conference room into the hospital corridor, and neither of them spoke for a moment. And then Junho said, without turning to look at her, "Do you want coffee?" It was such an ordinary question, after such an extraordinary hour, that Adeze almost laughed. "Yes," she said. They went to the small cafe on the hospital's ground floor, the one that stayed open all night and smelled of toasted barley and instant milk. They sat across from each other at a table near the window. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul always did, moving, glittering, refusing to sleep. "I haven't asked a patient how they were feeling in 8 months, Junho said. He was looking at his coffee. "Not really. Not in the way that means something. I ask it as a clinical prompt. Any pain today? Any shortness of breath? But not..." He stopped, searched for the word. "Not humanly." Adeze wrapped both hands around her cup. "I video call my mother every Sunday," she said. "But I haven't actually listened to what she says in a long time. I keep doing other things while she talks. I tell myself I'm multitasking." She paused. "I think I've been multitasking my whole life." I think I've been so afraid of falling behind that I never let myself be fully in any one place. Where are you trying to get to? Junho asked. She thought about it. Really thought. When I was young, she said, I believed success was a destination. Like if I could just get there, wherever there was, everything would settle. The anxiety would stop. I would finally feel like I had enough. She looked up at him. I'm more successful than I've ever been, and I've never felt more empty. Junho was quiet for a long time. Then he said, My father called me last month. He wanted to tell me that my cousin got married. He talked for 20 minutes about the wedding, the food, the ceremony, how my aunt cried. I was charting a discharge summary while he spoke. I said, and really in the right places. He turned his coffee cup slowly on the table. I don't remember anything he said. I was present for none of it. Why? She asked, not accusatory, genuinely asking. Because I was already thinking about the next thing, he said. I am always thinking about the next thing. I have never once in my adult life just... He made a small gesture with his hand, an opening motion, like releasing something. Been where I am? Outside the window, a street cleaner was slowly making his way along the pavement, unhurried, methodical, covering the same patch of ground twice to make sure it was clean. Adeze watched him. Junho watched him too. He's not in a rush, she said. No, Junho said. He looks like he knows exactly what he's doing. He probably does. They sat with that for a while. The weeks after the case review were different. Not dramatically. Medicine does not allow dramatic change because the ward still filled, the patients still came, the nights were still long, and the mornings were still brutal. But something had shifted, tectonic and slow, beneath the surface of how both of them moved through their days. Adeze began to arrive at her patients' bedsides and stay a moment longer. Not much longer, but enough to look at them as people rather than tasks. Enough to notice that the woman in bed 12 had been staring at the ceiling with the expression of someone rehearsing bad news, and to sit beside her and say, "How are you actually doing?" and mean it. The woman cried for 10 minutes. Nobody had asked her that in 3 weeks. After she cried, she laughed a little, embarrassed, and Adeze handed her a tissue and thought, "This took 4 minutes. 4 minutes I have been denying both of us." Junho started walking to the cardiology consult instead of rushing. He stopped using his spare minutes to pre-read the next chart and used them to walk through the hospital's small interior courtyard, where a cherry tree had been planted by a previous department head and had grown, quietly and without anyone particularly noticing, into something beautiful. He stood under it one morning and looked up through the branches and felt something in his chest loosen, not break, just loosen, like a knot eased by dampness and time. He called his father back, not to report, not to check a box. He called him and said, "Appa, tell me about the wedding again. I want to hear it properly this time." His father paused, surprised, and then began, and this time Junho listened. His father's voice was warm and a little reedy with age, and it described the color of the bride's dress and the way his aunt had covered her face with both hands when she cried. And Junho sat on the edge of his bed in his small apartment and felt, for the first time in a very long time, connected to something that was not his career. He texted Adeze afterward. A simple message, "Called my father. You were right. We've been running." She replied, "How was it?" He took a moment. Then, like drinking water when you didn't know you were thirsty. Lee Myung-ho was discharged on a Tuesday in March, 6 weeks after his cardiac event. He walked out slowly, his wife at his side, a folded discharge summary in his hand. Adeze was at the nurse's station when he passed. He stopped. He was a quiet man, the type who expressed things through stillness rather than speech. He looked at her for a moment and then said, "Thank you for checking on me, after everything. You came back the next day and the day after that. You didn't have to." She had not known he had noticed. "Of course," she said. "You seemed different," he said. "Slower, like you were actually there." She thought about that for a long time after he left. Junho was in a consultation when Myung-ho was discharged, doing the thing he had been practicing, sitting with uncertainty instead of rushing to resolution. A patient with an ambiguous cluster of symptoms that could have been one of three things. The old Junho would have picked the most probable diagnosis and moved. The new Junho said to the patient, "I want to take a little more time with this. I want to be sure." The patient looked at him with something close to relief. Like being seen was itself a form of treatment. There was a moment in late March when Adiz and Junho were both in the break room at the same time, for the first time in weeks. She was eating rice from a container she had packed at home, jollof, which she made every Sunday now as a deliberate act of self-restoration. The smell of tomatoes and Scotch bonnet pepper that meant Lagos and her mother's kitchen, and all the things she had been running away from without knowing it. He was eating a convenience store sandwich with the focused attention of someone practicing presence even in small things. He looked at her container. "That smells incredible." "Jollof rice," she said. "Nigerian." "What's in it?" She told him. Tomatoes, peppers, onions, bay leaf, chicken stock, and the kind of patience you cannot rush because the flavor lives in the time. He listened the way she had learned to listen to patience, not for the next thing to say, but simply to receive. "My grandmother made rice slowly," he said. "She said rice that was rushed tasted of nothing." "That's exactly right," Adeyeze said. They ate in silence for a while. The good kind. The kind between people who have been through something together and no longer need to fill the space with words. "I think rest was weakness," she said eventually. "In Lagos, if you stopped, someone overtook you. That was real, that was true. I carried that belief here and forgot that I was no longer in that race." "What race are you in now?" Junho asked. She thought. "A longer one," she said. "The kind where pace matters more than speed, where you have to know your body and your limits or you burn out before the finish line." "I think I've been sprinting a marathon," he said. "So have I." They were both quiet. Then Adeyeze said, "Myungho told me I seemed slower, like I was actually there. He meant it as a compliment." "Did it feel like one?" "It felt like the best thing anyone said to me in years," she said. The cherry tree in the courtyard bloomed in April, sudden and extravagant, the way it always did, as if it had been waiting patiently all winter to make exactly this point. Adeyeze saw it from the window of the ward during a quiet moment between patient checks. She stopped. She stood there for 2 full minutes, just looking. The petals were the pink of something almost embarrassingly gentle, the color of a thing that makes no apologies for being soft. She thought of her mother, who grew a small garden behind their Lagos house, in a strip of soil between the fence and the kitchen wall, tomatoes and bitter leaf, and a single stubborn rose that bloomed every year without anyone particularly tending it. Her mother had pointed at it once, when Adeyeze was perhaps 12 years old, and said, "You see that? Nobody planted it carefully. Nobody watered it every day. It just decided to grow." At the time, Adeyeze had found this observation unremarkable. Standing at the window watching the sole cherry tree bloom, she finally understood what her mother was telling her. Some things needed less management and more faith. Some things needed you to stop running long enough to let them take root. She called her mother that evening, not on Sunday. On a Wednesday at 9 p.m., sitting on her apartment floor with her back against the bed, still in her scrubs, a cup of tea going cold beside her. Her mother answered on the second ring, as she always did, because her mother was the kind of person who never let a call go unanswered. "Adez, why are you calling on a Wednesday? Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine, Mama," she said. "I just wanted to talk. No reason, I wanted to hear your voice properly." There was a pause. Then her mother said, warmly and a little carefully, the way you handle something you don't want to startle, "I'm here, Nin, I'm listening." And Adeyeze, for the first time in 2 years, did not do anything else while her mother spoke. She did not check her phone. She did not mentally compose tomorrow's schedule. She did not catalogue her to-do list against the hours left in the day. She just listened. And her mother's voice came through the phone like something that had been waiting, like the rose in the Lagos garden, patient and undemanding. And Adeyeze held it close and felt at last the specific relief of arriving somewhere after a very long journey. Not at success, not at the promotion or the certification or the title, somewhere quieter and more true than any of those things, somewhere she recognized, the way you recognize a place you have never been but always known. She arrived at herself. Junho, around the same hour, was sitting on his apartment balcony watching the Han River below, the lights of the city scattered across it like spilled salt. He was not doing anything. He was not reviewing charts or reading journals or preparing for tomorrow. He was sitting in the cool April air, being exactly where he was, which was a thing he had not done since he was a child, building model ships on his bedroom floor in Busan, while his mother sang to herself in the kitchen. He had been happy then. Not successful, just happy. The two things he was beginning to understand were not the same road. You could take one and lose sight of the other entirely. He had taken one and run so hard and so far that he had forgotten the other even existed. He picked up his phone and opened the message thread with a daise. "I'm sitting outside," he wrote, "not doing anything. Feels strange." Her reply came after a few minutes. "I know. Keep sitting." He smiled at his phone, which was not something he did often, and put it face down on the armrest and looked back at the river. Below him, Seoul moved and glittered and rushed, the way it always did, the way cities do, chasing, building, becoming. And Junho sat above it, still, breathing, present, and let it move without him for a little while. That was enough. For now, that was more than enough. Neither of them had arrived yet. Not really. The promotions would continue. The ambition had not died. It had simply been set at last, in proportion to everything else that mattered. They were still nurses and doctors, still working long nights in a demanding city, far from the places that had made them. But something irreversible had happened. Something that a rushing person would have missed entirely. Something that only revealed itself when you finally stopped long enough to let it catch up with you. They had learned, not from a book, not from a seminar, but from a patient whose heart had almost stopped because two people were moving too fast to truly see him, that speed is not the same as direction, that efficiency is not the same as wisdom, that you can sprint your entire life toward a finish line that keeps moving, collecting achievements the way a moving car collects distance, and arrive, if you arrive at all, to find the thing you were really looking for was in every moment you did not stop to honor. The long way home, it turned out, was never about the route. It was about learning to be present on the road. It was about understanding that the journey itself was the destination, and that all the shortcuts in the world could not give you back the moments you had rushed past in the name of getting somewhere. Adeze and Junho had both arrived broken. But broken, as any nurse or doctor knows, is not the same as finished. Broken is where the healing begins, and healing, unlike everything else they had ever valued, could not be rushed.